Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 80 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. Bonus points because you can see him today. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, the camera working aside, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. The last time that people saw me, I was probably about, I had about 5 pounds more of beard on my face. I was looking like Shane over there. I had a pretty big beard. We're getting back there. It's only been a couple days. And I've probably put on about, 15 pounds of football eating weight in the past, however many times since I've been on the pod. So, I'm happy that people can finally see both of our faces at the same time. It's so, 2 weeks ago, I thought you could see me the whole time, and I thought the people could see me the whole time, but apparently that wasn't the case.
Yeah, we figured out when we went to cut up the clips that you just weren't there. So the beard thing, was that like I'm not shaving till the Eagles lose? Is that what's going on here?
No, that was I'm not shaving until the Phillies are out of the playoffs, and then they lost the World Series, so I went and shaved a couple days later. Yeah, not. This is an in between phase. We need to fast forward 2 weeks so I can get back to having a beard, but not have it be, so lumberjacky.
Yeah, the first part of growing out the beard's annoying when it's prickly and itchy. Then you get past that and it's all smooth sailing from there.
The worst. By the way, I'll just say, shout out to Jason Kelsey. I was just watching his podcast earlier, which I watched the Jalen Hurts interview last week, and it turned me in. Like I've went back and skipped through all these other Jason Kelsey, Travis Kelsey podcasts. Just a phenomenal beard. A top 5 beard of all time on Jason Kelsey, I'd have to say.
Yeah, I listened to the Jalen Hurts episode, and I subscribed to it. I'm going to start listening. I did not go back and catch all the old ones, but the Kelsey brothers are pretty entertaining podcasters, that's for sure.
Yeah, Travis came across way better than I thought he would. I think we all know Jason. We all kind of figured he'd probably be really good at this. But Travis, man, he's pretty good. I kind of never thought he'd be, the most likable guy, to put it lightly. But yeah, he's great on the pod.
I thought it was hilarious when he was talking about Geno Smith stealing his job twice. For those of you that haven't listened to the podcast, you should go check it out. New Heights podcast. It's really good. But he talked about going to a passing camp when he was a high school quarterback, and Geno Smith basically outshined him. And so he ends up changing positions. So Geno Smith took his job once, and then he was convinced he was going to get drafted by Rex Ryan and the Jets, and then they took Geno Smith instead. So he said he's always had a little bit of a friendly grudge against Geno Smith because Geno stole his job twice.
It's funny now that you mentioned that you listened to that podcast. After we recap the Eagles game, and this is inside baseball for the people listening to Chalk Talk, of segment planning, I think we should go through and talk about that podcast, because I think Jalen said a lot of interesting stuff about the draft and some of that. So I think we should get to that. That's a little tease for the people at the top of the episode.
All right, well, let's get into it. So our episode title tonight is The Circle of Parity is Complete. In case you don't know what this is, I might be the only person that nerds out about this, but every year I'm always fascinated by the Circle of Parity in the NFL, which is just a line you can draw from any one team in the NFL to any other team in the NFL and show through common opponents why you're better than any other team. And so the unfortunate part of the Eagles losing last night to the Commanders is that every team has a loss, and now the Circle of Parity is complete. So I tweeted this out earlier. If you want to go trace it out, whatever team you follow, you can pick any team on here and you can prove that you're better than them. So time is a flat circle. The NFL, nobody's good. Everybody can beat everybody else, apparently. So you can go check that out. I always think that's fascinating. Nobody else probably does. But there we go. There's our first little random aside for tonight. So let's get into the Eagles' Monday Night Football game against the Washington Commanders. They lose the game 21-32 in a game that was closer than that. Obviously, you get the hook and lateral touchdown on the last play of the game to make it a 2-score game. Mark, I talked about this game on post-game. I just got done talking about it on Birds of the Round Table. And usually by the time I get to this show, I've watched all 22 and I have new things to say. I don't really have new things to say because all 22 is not out yet with it being a Monday night game. So I'm going to throw it to you first here. You and I have dialogued a little bit off air. This probably has a different clientele than my post game show did, but if you listen to me both places, you might hear me say a lot of the same things. So I'm going to kick it to you, Mark, and I'm going to let you lead us off. What were your main takeaways with the Eagles Commanders game?
Yeah, I mean, this was just one of those games where you're snake bitten. It felt like, and obviously, there's a lot of matchup stuff, and there's a lot of coaching decisions, and there's a lot of comments we can make about everything from Jalen Hurts to the defense to the running game to the play calling, and we're going to get into all that. But man, it just felt like it was Murphy's Law. It was everything that could go wrong would. Like it was just, you get that play to Quez and it's a fumble. That Dallas Goedert fumble that's also a face mask that they missed that also injures, one of our best players, which is probably worse news than anything else in the entire game. There's just so many gut punches and gut punching moments from this game. And then, that's outside the fact where I'm just going to get this out of the way off the top so we can just keep it strictly football the rest of the way. And I can, not sound like a homer. But I will just say that was one of the, I think, most poorly officiated games of this season. It's actually funny. Last weekend, I don't know what, I think it was during one of the primetime games I was watching with people. And I actually made a comment where I was like, you know what? It feels like NFL officiating, they've done a lot better of a job this year. It really felt like there's been less controversial moments. There's been less obvious missed calls. There's obviously things here and there that you make note of, but there were way less times in general just preparing for this podcast where I feel like we have to talk about a big call in a game, or I feel like we have to talk about the refs swinging a game one way or the other. Whereas in years past, I feel like that almost happened on a weekly basis where we had to kind of talk about a bad call here or there. And in this game, it felt like there was three of them that you could really make a case or of that caliber. And this is not to take away anything from the some of the negatives that the Eagles had from that game. And I'm not saying that they played well. But what I am saying is I think if the game was correctly officiated in terms of you get rid of the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson hit on the sideline being a late hit, you get rid of that fumble, which should have been negated by a face mask penalty, and then you, at the very least, give the Eagles a chance at the end of the game with 1 minute and 40 seconds left. If you don't call, Heineke's flop job an unnecessary roughness on Brandon Graham, it just feels like if you at least, call two of those three correctly, the Eagles probably still win this game. That's not to say that you walk out of it feeling great or you walk out of it saying they should have won no matter what. But it is to say that, I do think that the refs kind of cost them the game. And obviously the fumble, most of all, I think is what cost them the game. But I'll kind of steal your words out of your mouth that I know are going to come back at me here because we talked off air. The margin, you have to make the margins bigger than that. That's exactly what you're going to say, and you're correct. You have to outplay the Commanders by more than you did, and if you did. But even having said that, you'd like to have the chance to make the plays to do that instead of the ball being taken out of your hands. It feels like twice by the refs.
Yeah, the officiating was poor in this game. I did think the Eagles caught a break on that OPI call. I wouldn't have flagged that. I thought that was just a pretty basic, fairly well executed rub route. The Dallas Goedert face mask, that's the most egregious missed call to me. I mean, I don't know how you missed that one. The Chauncey Gardner-Johnson late hit that wasn't a late hit, that one sucks. It was already a first down. It's not like it cost you a possession like the face mask. It didn't cost you a first down on third down. It was just yards. That wasn't as, I mean, it's a bad call. That one didn't hurt as bad.
They did kick a 55-yard field goal on that drive though, right?
No, that was I think that one was the one where like 2 plays later they threw the interception because I remember tweeting. Okay. And Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was the one that got it because I remember tweeting that clip and saying the ball don't lie.
Yeah, you're right.
That line almost got me ejected from a high school basketball game when I was a coach a couple years ago. I might have muttered that too loud and an official heard it, but that's a story for a different time. I can safely say it on Twitter during Eagles games. And then the one at the end, I that one just sucks all the way around. I've never seen a quarterback do that. I've never even thought about a quarterback doing that. And so you put yourself in Brandon Graham's shoes. The whistle hasn't blown. He said after the game he's trying to touch him down. He didn't light him up. He's sliding in to touch him. And it's a combination of a lot of bad things. A bizarre scenario that Brandon Graham's never been in or even thought about before. The whistle comes in a little late. I mean, as the whistle comes in, Graham's already sliding, so it's not like he slid in to touch him down after the whistle. So a little bit of a late whistle, an unprecedented deal, a great flop by Heineke. I mean, I think I don't fault the officials for throwing a flag on that one. It sucks. It's a sucky situation. But, I guess those are the breaks. You got to make the margins bigger, and you would love for the Eagles not to go 3 and out. They had the ball in their hands with 2 minutes left and get a quick 3 and out to force you into that situation. So just a comedy of errors, just all game long.
And then I think the natural place to go next is the defense, because I think that's the most concerning aspect of this game. I think ultimately on offense, you had one deep ball taken out of A.J. Brown's hands, literally, into an interception. Basically,
was that a bad decision to throw that ball?
I don't, I saw some of the discourse on Twitter. I'm not going to get upset with that because it literally was in A.J. Brown's hands. Like, I think it was probably a good throw. I think it was a 50-50 ball. Is it smart to throw 50-50 balls? That might be a question for another day. That might be a question for like an all-season pod, honestly. But it's, when you have A.J. Brown, you want to take those chances. But then you also kind of say, when you have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert, someone should be open enough to eliminate the need to take 50-50 ball chances. So, I can see both sides of the argument. I think that's more of like a strategy argument. In that situation, I didn't have a problem going deep in that situation and taking a chance. It just didn't work out. Then you obviously have the deep ball to Quez, which is a perfect pass, a perfect catch, a perfect everything. You just wish the defender was a little closer to Quez and would have touched him down before he got up and started running again. Those two things, man, it's just, that's terrible luck right there. The offense doesn't concern me at all, to be quite honest. But the defense, I know everyone's going to talk about Jordan Davis, and I actually don't know. I'm not looking at the stat sheet right in front of me. What did the yards per carry end up being for Washington in this game?
They averaged 3.1 yards per carry, and their long was 11. So, people talked a lot about the run defense, and there was a lot of fire Gannon. Gannon's atrocious, all that stuff on Twitter, and I just don't agree with that. The run defense was fine. Washington averaged 3.1 yards per carry.
It was good.
They were the best run defense in the NFL in the season is 3.5. So, the problem was there were no negative plays. Their long was 11. They didn't have some 40-yard run, and then a bunch of tackles behind the line. It was just consistently 2 or 3 yards. There weren't negative plays. There weren't big plays, which is still fine. You're trying to get them into third and shorts, third and mediums, where they've been atrocious this year. They've been 27th in the league in third downs, converting at like 34%. At the end of the game, it doesn't look awful. They converted 12 at 21, but at one point they were 11 of 14. And specifically in the first half, they converted 5 of 6 third downs that they attempted passes on, the lone exception being the very first drive of the game. I think a lot of that, I think Darius Slay got in his head, and I think it started early. That first drive, there were 2 specific times that I saw a ball to the sideline, and I felt like Darius Slay expected Josiah Scott to carry that route more vertically than he did. And that's a small thing, but cornerbacks, they play off of confidence, and they play off of swagger. And when you start thinking and stop reacting, not fully trusting the guy, because he's not the guy that you've been passing routes off with the whole season. It's a new guy now. I think Darius Slay got in his head a little bit, and I think you saw that down the stretch. I think he probably had one of his worst games as an Eagle. It might not be worse than the Metcalf game. It might be. I don't know. But I think that compounded. And I saw people complaining about soft coverage, but the reality is the way that the defense has is structured now to account for the run. It means your linebackers have to play into gaps faster, your safeties have to flow downhill faster. And so that means if you put Darius Slay in press coverage on a fast guy like Terry McLaurin, will he win 80-85% of those reps? Maybe, probably. But those two or three that he doesn't, those are touchdowns if the ball's put on target. And so do you take that chance against a bad offense? I wouldn't, and Gannon didn't. But the defense was just unable to get off the field, and it compounds throughout the game as time of possession mounts. Um, I really felt like schematically the defense was fine. I felt like the execution was really poor.
Yeah, you know me, I kind of have a tough time with Gannon's scheme, and I understand the logic behind it. And for me, this has nothing to do with run defense. I actually think the run defense was good in this game. I mean, to everyone complaining about it, 3.1 yards per carry. There's nothing to complain about there. You made a great point there by saying the number one run defense that allows 3.5 yards per carry. It's all about pass defense for me, and this kind of I've never been the hugest proponent of let's talk about Darius Slay like he's a top five corner in football, even over the last 2 years where he's probably played like it and put himself in that conversation. And I know a lot of people have wanted to put him in all pro talk and things like that. And I think the scheme protects him a lot, obviously, when, like, for the reasons you said, you back him off press and you just limit big plays and you keep everything in front of you. That's going to make corners look even better than they are. And I think it's helped Bradbury a lot as well. And now Bradbury's going to cash in on that and get big money next year, probably in part because of how easy it is, I think, for a good cornerback to look great in our scheme. Having said that, sometimes I think you have to throw a different look when something's clearly not working. And I think at halftime of this game, there should have been adjustments made at some point to avoid some of the easiest, pitch and catch 20-yard throws where it just felt like guys would just run and they'd sit in the zone. They'd find this little zone and McLaurin does that incredibly. He always has, where he just finds this little spot in the field and he stops. He just sits there because he knows how much time he has, and as long as the quarterback sees him, he's going to hit him. And it felt like that happened a couple times with us in this game, with not just McLaurin, but at a certain point, and you mentioned the one play I wanted to talk about where Slay looked just confused, like he was standing there, and McLaurin cut in on a slant, and he was kind of like, wait, I thought that was Scott. So, yeah, there was a lot of miscommunication, it seems like, and I think that's part of it, and that can get cleaned up. But I would like to see Gannon be a bit more reactive at times. I don't have any huge issues with, anything schematically. It's more so just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I think it was a little bit broke in this specific game. I think you have to at least try to make it change. It's at a certain point.
I think on that one play, I don't know for sure. I think Slay thought it was a quarters coverage call and the route broke, so it's not his responsibility. And I think that Scott thought it was a man coverage call, which would mean that Slay's guy. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my speculation. And just on execution too, we talk about the run defense. Brian Robinson had 86 rushing yards in this game. Do you want to guess how many of those were after contact?
Yeah, probably 40, 50.
86. He had
Oh my
86
God.
he had 86 yards after contact, and he had 86 total rushing yards. Now, I mean, obviously, you can get contacted 3 yards behind the line on one play. That doesn't mean he was literally contacted at the line of scrimmage every play, but tackling is a big issue, and it has been for this team. I thought one adjustment they made at half, they started to shift Javon Hargrave into that nose position because, let me tell you, Marlon Tuipulotu should never step foot on an NFL football field again. He's a horrendous player in every aspect. He's awful. I don't know why they put him at the nose after it was so bad against the Texans, but they did it again. It was awful. And we could talk about Fletcher Cox being totally washed because he is. But they shifted Javon Hargrave into that nose spot, and they started to do more four-down fronts, which I think they need to do in this interim. It allows you to play your coverages a little differently. I think there's some adjustments schematically that you make now. You're 2 weeks into no Jordan Davis. The answers you've tried haven't worked great. I think this is where you just start to get back into more of a traditional 4-3 and you change the structure of your defense until Davis comes back. But execution was just really poor from the defense in this game. And you compound that with the offense is just, let's be honest, it was a lot of bad luck. They get the first drive, obviously, they score a quick touchdown. Second drive, they go score a touchdown. We're cruising, right? Third drive, you get the interception. I didn't like that throw. I get to say that I don't like that throw because I also said I didn't like the throw when he did the same thing against the Steelers and it was a touchdown. I just don't want to put that ball into double coverage. I think you got too many weapons. And you're not that desperate. You're moving the ball good. But it's fine. He's going to make that throw, and I'm okay with it. It's not what I would coach him to do. It's whatever. It was a bad break. And, the ball hits Brown in the hands. It's a perfect throw. I mean, it did go right through the corner's hands to get to Brown's hands, too. So if the corner makes a better play, it maybe never even gets there to begin with. But I wouldn't make that throw. Then you get the 2-minute situation where they go 3 and out. And, I thought Hurts should have hit Kenny Gainwell on the check down on third down to move the sticks there. He tries to take it to A.J. Brown. I can't tell you for sure that was the wrong decision because all 22 is not out, and I can't see. On what we saw on broadcast, Brown looks covered. This is going to be a contested catch situation. That may be because he slipped and fell down. He might have been open if that hadn't happened. I don't know. But what I do know is that that's a first down if you dump the ball off to Kenny Gainwell and you move the sticks and keep that 2-minute drill thing alive. And so I thought that was a mistake from Hurts. And then, you can say what you want about the interception. It's worked before. I'm not going to say it's a mistake. It's just not what I would have done. Maybe I'm a little too risk averse. But then the other mistake I thought Hurts made was at the end of the game, that third down where he hits the top of his drop. He drops his eyes and immediately tries to run, and he takes a 6-yard sack. Outside of those two plays, Hurts played a really good football game. I mean, we shouldn't even be talking about a loss. That ball that he put on Quez Watkins was just incredible. They take the holding and go to 1st and 20, and I'm thinking in my head, don't panic, just because it felt like a game, it felt like a situation where you're going to press. Like, don't panic, get 7 yards, get to 2nd and 12, 13, whatever. Just allow yourself to work into a 4-down situation. And he hits the top of his drop and just rips a deep ball. And I was thinking, oh, don't do that. And then it's just on the money to Quez Watkins splitting the safeties. And that should have been the ball game. Quez should have caught that and housed it. And he trips and falls down, and then he fumbles. And I'm not worried about the offense. I thought the offense played really good. There's mistakes that happen in every game. It felt like in this game, every mistake was in the highest possible leverage situation. Ball off of Brown's hand is intercepted. Hurts drops his eyes, which he hasn't done much this year, and it's a sack that kills a drive. You've got a Dallas Goedert fumble that was a joke of a missed face mask call. You've got a Quez Watkins fumble. Like, it was a litany of errors. Anytime you double your turnover output for the season in one game, you're probably not going to win that game. The Eagles had a shot still to win that game, and so it's hard for me to feel too bad about it. In a game where you allowed historic third down conversions, you got doubled up on time of possession. You doubled your turnovers. You still had the ball with 2 minutes left and a shot to go drive and win the game. So, to me, you flush that win and you move on. I got off of a post game last night and I was ready to move on. This isn't a loss I was going to wake up this morning. It was frustrated to watch. It's not a loss that's going to make me worried long term because I just thought every possible thing that could go wrong did, and sometimes that happens.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. It's not a game I'm worrying about long term or worrying about things repeating themselves. I will say I think A.J. Brown laid an egg last night, kind of. Like, I thought he just didn't look very good, didn't get very open, even on the times he didn't get targeted. I thought that there was a couple balls, that were broken up to him that were contested catches, and I didn't really feel like he fought that hard, especially on the one slant where the guy kind of just stuck a hand in there. And then obviously he falls down. That's probably not, that's not someone's fault. He's tripped there.
I do know that first catch he had, which I guess it was the lone catch he had of the night, he tweaked his ankle coming out of his break on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you wonder how much that impacted him. When he falls down on that third down that Hurts tried to throw to him, it doesn't have to be somebody's fault. You can just slip. That could have been the ankle, the not fighting through contact. All of that could come back to that ankle trying to play through an injury. So yeah, it was a bad game for AJ Brown. His worst as an Eagle. I don't know what role injuries played in it. He would tell you that they didn't, but I don't think that's the truth. I think there's things going on with his ankle there off of that first cut, and that's another thing. I mean, Dallas Goedert gets hurt during the game. Both Brown and Devontae Smith are spend some time in the medical tent. Josh Sweat spends some time in the medical tent, goes to the locker room, comes back, and comes into the game. So you had star players in and out of the lineup, and with everything else going on, it just you get out, you lost the game. That sucks, but you move on and you don't let that game beat you again on Sunday.
Is there any update on Avonte Maddox?
He's on IR, so he'll miss at least 3 more games.
Oh, so they just put him on IR?
Yeah, they put him on IR. I think it was actually Monday, like Monday afternoon. So he didn't practice all week with a hamstring injury, and I think they knew all along he wouldn't play Monday, excuse me. But they probably, soft tissue injuries, that's hard to project out. You put him on IR, he's out for 4 weeks. So I don't know what the decision-making process was going into that, but they did put him on IR before the game Monday, so that counts as game 1. So he'll be out 3 more games at a minimum. And you would assume he'd be back. You wouldn't assume he would miss more than that with a hamstring, but we'll see. And all that, we talked about the miscommunications with Josiah Scott and Darius Slay. This isn't the first time Avonte Maddox has been out of a game this season. He was injured early in the year too. And so this can also be invaluable experience for Josiah Scott if he's got to step in for a second half or for a game, week 17 against the or else that week 17 is the Saints, week 18 against the Giants in a game that maybe means something or in the playoffs. You do get some valuable reps here for Josiah Scott over the next few weeks.
I have a hot take, Shane.
All right, lay it on me.
Is Avonte Maddox, or I guess it's a hot take, a question that could turn into a hot take. Is it possible that Avonte Maddox is more important to this defense than Jordan Davis?
Yes, possibly.
It's just both, because it's not, yeah. I mean,
yeah, both for how the Eagles like to play zone matching things. So you got the continuity there, and for what they ask their slot corner to do in run fits. And Avonte Maddox is a good tackler. He's small. He does not knock people backwards, but he doesn't often miss tackles as guys stumble over him forward 2 yards. So I think he's pretty good as a run fitter. So it's possible, although his backup is much more competent than anything else the Eagles have at defensive tackle, I think. So
that's fair.
It's an interesting thought, though.
Yeah, I definitely just felt like we were missing Avonte in the slot in this game. I think that there probably is some communication issues that come with just shuffling in guys as opposed to not having Avonte out there. So that was just the thought that I had when everyone was obviously talking about Jordan Davis on Twitter, because that's what Eagles Twitter is now. It's just a collection of people that like to talk about Jordan Davis. I kid. But
I like to think I started that trend week 1.
Yeah, no, you're definitely a part of that. You're definitely a part of that. And me hating on it is not me saying I don't think Jordan Davis is a tremendous run stuffer. I do. I just sometimes think Eagles fans are talking about a guy who's playing 30% of the snaps, and he's really good in those 30% of the snaps. But I think sometimes when not you and not the smart people on Eagles Twitter, but I think that there are some casual Eagles fans that tweet out oh, Jordan Davis being out killing us, and it's like, well, yeah, you probably think he plays 100% of the snaps. It's not 70% of the snaps you're seeing that you're complaining about, he wouldn't have been out there for anyway. So
it is, but probably not in the way that you imagine. This Monday night was the worst TJ Watt and Kazir White games of the season. And a lot of that goes to Jordan Davis being out, because they're asked, with Davis out, they're asked to play faster into the gaps, and they're just not good at that. And so really, and this is going to kill people that were not fans of the pick, because Davis is never going to be a big stat guy. It's what he does for so many other people. So they're right they're right in a sense, but not in the way that they think.
I'm not even necessarily trying to justify the pick at this point, or go against the pick at this point. I'm more so just yelling at the Eagles fans who think he's playing way more than he is, I guess, and
Yeah.
think that, plugging Jordan Davis back in is just like a cure all, fix all, when it's just not the case, because he's not playing enough to be a cure all, fix all type of guy. But he's great when he's out there. There's absolutely no debate on that.
The difference in him being out there and not is that the Commanders consistently got to 2nd and 7 instead of 2nd and 9 or 10,
That's fair. Yeah.
and that impacts everything else. But at the end of the day, the Commanders had a negative EPA on early downs. First and second down was a negative EPA. That the early down defense did its job. It could have made the late down defense's job easier, but they put the late down defense in advantageous situations, and they just couldn't get off the field.
Yeah, I just think that the third down pass defense was just so reprehensibly bad in this game. And ultimately, aside from my officiating comments, I think that is ultimately, in terms of on field, uh, you know, issues, I think that was the number one issue that led to them losing the game.
Yeah. All right. I got that out of my system. You got anything else that you want to throw out there from the game before we move on into the rest of the slate?
No, before we go to the rest of the slate, let's touch on some of the Jalen Hurts stuff from the Jason Kelsey interview. I thought that was fascinating.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think one of the biggest things I thought was interesting was when he talked about the draft, and he thought he had no clue, he was going to end up in Philadelphia, and he said that he thought Pittsburgh was a possibility. And so when he got the area code, and I don't remember what it is, I'm not from Pennsylvania, but when the area code popped up on his phone, he's like, "But the Steelers just picked," and he was kind of confused about what was going on. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah. It's shocking that Howie fell so in love with Jalen, and we literally just met with him at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's pretty crazy that there was absolutely no contact between the Eagles and Jalen leading up between the combine to the draft, and then you just draft him to back up your, former franchise QB who makes a ton of money on a deal you just gave him. It's still so crazy that, I mean, and it's crazy. It's even crazier that it worked out, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. I'm trying to think of some of the other, things from. I guess them talking about Jason Kelsey snapping the ball was
Yeah.
very funny. How Jalen Hurts made a funny comment about, like, yeah, Kelsey snaps the ball different, and Kelsey said that's a nice way of saying every quarterback that I've ever played with hates the way that I snap the ball. And they're joking about how fast it gets on them. Yeah, it was just like, if you're an Eagles fan and you listen to that podcast, you're just gonna like smile like half the time, because
Yeah.
they're the best. Jason Kelsey and Jalen just come off as so likable.
I never thought about the snap thing before, um, and I'm the offensive line guy, and it makes total sense that Kelsey is so small, he's so undersized, he has to win with leverage and technique, and so he was talking about, he's got to snap it fast, he's got to get his hand back because he's got to get his hands placed right and all this stuff. Like, he can't that tenth of a second to get the ball out quick so he can get his hand up. That's the difference in him winning or losing a rep against. Let's face it, every guy that rushes against him is bigger and stronger than he is, and so he's all about leverage and technique. And I never really thought about that before, but yeah, I thought it was funny. Just his comment of, "That's the nice way of saying every quarterback I've ever played with hates the way I snap the ball."
Yeah, no, it was so funny. And I guess one last thing, did you kind of get the vibe from that podcast that this is probably Jason's last year?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I thought that when they drafted Cam Jurgens as well, but it kind of seemed like it to me, and I think the Eagles know that. I think everybody probably knows that. Um, Although he did leave it open a little bit. He thought he
Yeah.
was done after 2020. Um, there was also some. It was subtle. Just listening to it, if you didn't know all the background, you wouldn't maybe think about it. But as I listened to it, I couldn't help but hear just like all of the under the radar things about how awful Carson Wentz was in the locker room. Like, Hertz kind of talked about working with quarterbacks, and he didn't do it in a way to throw shade, but you could tell. And the same with Kelsey, just talking kind of about the disaster of 2020. And I mean, to
Mhm.
be honest, I got the vibe that Kelsey was done partway through the 2020 season, and them going to Hurts maybe brought him back. So just some interesting nuggets there, but definitely recommend it. It was a great podcast to go listen to.
Yeah, if you're an Eagles fan, you have to check it out. It's definitely a must listen.
All right. Well, we're flushing that Eagles game away, and we're gonna get on to the rest of the slate here. Um, I should have put like preloaded like a flushing animation in here. Maybe we'll
What
fix
wasn't
that post production that I don't do, but whatever.
wasn't that a thing last year? Didn't Sirianni say flush it and move on or something?
I
Wasn't
don't
that a
know.
controversy after a game? Sirianni said something stupid in the post game. I'm looking this up now while we're talking.
Yeah, Sirianni saying something stupid to the press wouldn't surprise me. I love Sirianni. He's goofy. But anyways, so let's move on here into some of these other games. Some games I will admit I'm not as prepared for this podcast as I typically am. The
Oh,
different
timeout.
schedule. Okay, yeah.
Timeout. It was Jalen Hurts. Remember, he said, "You take a deuce. You don't sit there and look at it. You flush it and move on. We gonna flush it and move on." It was Jalen. I knew that there
Okay.
was something last
S-
year.
Sirianni
Exactly
was the
what I thought.
flower thing, planting
Yeah,
flowers.
yeah, the fertilizer.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I didn't get to rewatch as many of these games and stuff as I normally do. So I've got less notes over some of these. I told Mark maybe this is the ever elusive under an hour episode, but we're 36 minutes in and just moving off the Eagles. So it's just never going to happen. But we'll get into some of these, and some of them will probably go quick. We've got a few. We've got some more things to talk about, and as the season winds on, we're going to find ourselves focusing on more, a smaller subset of teams that are contenders more and more. But we'll start with two teams that aren't contenders on the Thursday night game. It was the Atlanta Falcons traveling to Carolina, and they lost 15-25. The Panthers ran the ball on 17 of their first 23 plays, and they had 128 yards rushing at halftime. They ended with 232, and I just think it's hilarious that they had to trade Christian McCaffrey to become a running team. Um, for the Falcons, the take is the same thing it's been for a month now. Marcus Mariota is just not it. He took 5 sacks, he threw a pick, had 2 more picks dropped. Like, Falcons, you're not contenders. You're not going to win your division this year. Just put Desmond Ritter out there and see what he can do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, Mariota was really bad in this game. Took 5 sacks. It's not like he really allowed for the running backs to do all that well. The running backs were 22 carries for 95 yards, so it's not like they were efficient. Which the whole thing with Mariota is his play action so good that it's supposed to help the efficiency of the running game. Took 5 sacks, didn't help the efficiency of the running game. Threw a pick. Also threw the pick where he was on his back. I don't know if you saw that one where he was like, "Screw it, someone down there somewhere," and just threw it up. But they ended up ruling him down, so he didn't end up
Somebody tweeted
counting
that
it.
clip in slow motion and said that's Kyler trying 360 no scopes in Call of Duty.
Oh man, didn't Kyler? No, I guess Kyler didn't get a win this weekend. Arizona got a win this weekend, so I guess we can still make fun of Kyler. But yeah, I mean this was definitely the game where it's like this is the tipping point. Like you're 4-6 now. You kind of gave up like your division lead, which was a farce anyway. Um, Go with a guy. Go with Ritter. Maybe he'll even like inject some life back into you, and you can compete. Because right now, I think what we're seeing, they're not going to compete to win this division.
No, no, not at all. All right, let's go to Germany for the early Sunday morning game. Seattle lost to Tampa Bay in Germany, 16-21, as Tom Brady became the first quarterback in NFL history to win a start in 4 different countries. So he now has wins in the United States, the United Kingdom, Mexico, and Germany. So Tampa Bay, they finally got a ground game going in this game. They have struggled to run the ball all year. Rashad White rushed for 105 yards. Spelling Leonard Fournette, who had rushed for 57 before he injured his hip. He was having his best game of the year as well. So Tampa Bay is going to hit their bye at 500, and they seem to be getting back on track, or at least getting on track enough to win the NFC South, which we just talked about is not a good division. For Seattle, though, this loss really hurts them in the NFC West. It's a division that's going to be a little more competitive. San Fran is coming on, as we knew they would. Kenneth Walker couldn't get anything going on the Bucs' run defense. He had 1.7 yards per carry. He had negative 33 rushing yards over expectation. So it was totally up to Geno Smith to do it through the air. And I thought Geno played well. He was 23 of 33 for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did lose a critical fumble inside the 10, but I thought Geno played well. It just wasn't the Seahawks' day, and they drop a game that they're going to wish they could have back as it goes down the stretch here in the West.
Yeah, I mean, this was like the Bucs team we thought we were going to get. Maybe a secondaries that's not that great, and Geno was able to take advantage of that. But, I mean, the Bucs team of the last few years, you weren't going to run the football against them. And Seattle is so predicated on running the football. And Kenneth Walker, 10 carries, 17 yards, like you said. So this was the classic Todd Bowles, Tampa Bay Bucs defense finally showing up after a few weeks where they looked vulnerable against the run. So whatever was going on there, they were able to correct that. They were able to fix it. And they kind of got back on track. Yeah. I saw some Geno negativity on Twitter about this, and it's probably because it was basically a primetime game in the morning. It was a standalone game, so everyone was watching the same game, so everyone has to complain about something. And anyone who's complaining about Geno in this game, I mean, he had 275 yards. He was over 8 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I get that he lost the fumble, but I thought Geno was very good in this game. And Geno continues to be very good, so it shouldn't be surprising. But Tom Brady was very good in this game, outside of the fact that if you are calling the plays for a Tom Brady-led offense, how on earth do you justify calling a play where Tom Brady is a receiver and is the intended target after what happened in 2017 and then after what happened on Sunday? Like, how do you honestly think that that's a good option? It just feels like it's a house of horrors. As soon as Tom Brady goes out to run a route, bad things happen.
What was Tom Brady's 40 time at the combine?
What was it? 5?
I don't know, 5 something. Tariq Woolen's literally the most athletic defensive back ever measured. I don't think I'm throwing to Tom. We talk about picking your matchups. I don't think that's a matchup I'm taking.
Who got the pick? Is that Fournette? Yeah, it was Fournette.
Yeah, Fournette threw it, and Tariq Woolen picked it off.
Oh my God! Just terrible play calling there by Leftwich to put Tom Brady back in that situation. I mean, Tom is going to wake up. By the way, Tom's got a lot going on. Obviously, the divorce. I don't know if you're following any of this FTX stuff. I don't know if you. But... So FTX. By the way, I'm not too well versed in any of this. It's a cryptocurrency. I guess it ran a bunch of these other cryptocurrencies, and basically there's a ton of these people who had a ton of money in this company, and it just found out that they were completely defrauded, basically, and all this money is just gone. Tom Brady lost millions. So what an eventful couple weeks for Tom Brady with the divorce, losing millions in a Ponzi scheme, and you get to go to Germany and you win a game in Germany. So, I mean, hey, I guess it's not all bad for Tom Brady.
So Brady's going to be playing a few more years is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I think now especially that he chose football over his family, I think he has to play a few more years to justify the decision.
By the way, the whole thing with Leonard Fournette almost not getting his passport, which maybe it would have been good if he didn't. He wouldn't throw a pick. He wouldn't have hurt his hip. But
he would have went for Rashad White faster.
As a professional athlete who has known for months that you're going to Germany, how do you not have your passport? I don't even understand. And he's not the first one. It was a Giants punter or something earlier this year. Had the same sort of issue. I just don't understand. NFL teams should have a passport guy that's on that. I don't know, but
I appreciate it as a procrastinator and as someone who doesn't like to think of things until I absolutely have to. I appreciate knowing that I'm going to Germany. It's one of those situations where it's you see the schedule and it's oh, I'm going to Germany in the middle of November. And then September rolls around and you're that's so far away. Like that's in November. And then October rolls around. It's like that's like a month away, and then it's like, oh wait, I'm going to Germany next week and I don't have a passport. I respect it. I respect the procrastination by Leonard Fournette and the Giants punter.
All right, there you go. Procrastinate. It leads to greatness.
Yeah, yeah, procrastinate greatness.
All right, let's get into its craziest game of the year, probably. The Vikings at Buffalo. Vikings win this game 33-30 in overtime, but the ending of this game was wild. Like, I tell you guys that you can listen to this podcast and you can get a feel for what happened in all the other games. Go watch the last like 3 minutes of regulation of this game in overtime if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, let me just paint a picture for you. The Vikings are down by 4, and they have a 4th and 18, and Justin Jefferson makes the most ridiculous catch I've ever seen. Like, think of the OBJ catch if it was contested, because it's literally the same, like, one-handed catch, but taking it out of the hands of a defensive back. The Vikings
and if it was 4th and 18 to save a game.
Yeah. And then the Vikings get down to 4th and goal at the 1, and they have a failed QB sneak that Kirk Cousins could not have looked less interested in pushing into the end zone for. And you think this is it, it's over. So the Bills line up to QB sneak. And Josh Allen fumbles the snap on the QB sneak, and it's recovered by... So at first, I'm seeing this, and I think, oh, they didn't get out of the end zone. This is a safety. That sucks. Now it's a 1-point game. But then you realize, no. It wasn't a safety. They fumbled it, and Minnesota recovered it in the end zone for a touchdown. Minnesota takes a 3-point lead. Then Josh Allen goes 69 yards in 39 seconds, and the Bills kick a field goal to send it into overtime. And they end up losing in overtime on a Josh Allen interception. But just a crazy end of the game. I saw like the win probability chart for that one, and it just like going up and down. It looks like the stock market graphs just everywhere. So the biggest thing for me in this game, Justin Jefferson. Wow. Like, so he has 20 games with 100 plus yards right now, which is the most by any player in his first 3 seasons. In this game, he had 9 receptions with a sub 50% completion probability per next gen stats. No other player has ever had more than 6 in a game. So he just routinely making highlight reel catches. Justin Jefferson is a stud, man. And Minnesota is 8-1 now. They're tied for the best record in the NFL. Obviously, the Eagles have the tiebreaker. I continue to think Minnesota is not as good as their record says. They continue to win football games, and that's not easy to do. It's certainly not easy to do against Buffalo on the road. So props to Minnesota. I'm still not going to trust them in the playoffs, but they're definitely going to be there, and they've got a shot to be the 1 seed when they get there.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for them with the tiebreaker going to the Eagles there. Obviously, they're going to have to outperform the Eagles for the rest of the year. And we're going to get to Justin Jefferson either now or when we talk about the Dolphins, because me and Shane got in a little argument or a debate about the best receiver in the world. So I do want to talk about that and hash that out. But I'm going to talk about the other side of this game. I feel like you talked a lot about the Vikings, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bills. And I just want to say, as like I kind of consider myself a little bit of a Bills hater this year, because I think I've been the one coming on every week and saying, like, I'm not sure they're the best team, or like, should they really be the Super Bowl favorite? And even when they beat the crap out of the Rams in week 1, or even when they beat the Chiefs, I've been here to say, like, yeah, okay, but I'm not as sure as everyone else that they're just going to go win the Super Bowl. Having said all of that, this Josh Allen negativity that I've seen on Twitter after this game, where he's all of a sudden overrated and he's all of a sudden costing the Bills games. Are we serious with that? Like, I thought Josh Allen had universally the highest approval rating of like any star in sports, to the point where I remember on my radio show last year, when Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen faced each other in the playoffs and everyone was rooting for Josh Allen. I was like, when did this happen that we all hate Patrick Mahomes and love Josh Allen? I guess the life cycle of a star in sports, or maybe even more so, an NFL quarterback is just that when you get too good, people eventually there's a ticking time clock for people to that they can't wait to turn on you and they can't wait to kind of be anti the superstar. Josh Allen is an absolute superstar. He is the second, maybe third best quarterback in the NFL. I'd say second. We talked about that the other day. And I've seen a lot of like, oh, he's really good, but the turnovers are a killer. You take the 5% of bad plays that Josh Allen makes because of the 15 to 20% of incredible plays that Josh Allen makes that about 1% of quarterbacks who have ever played in the NFL can make. He's a special player, and you take the bad with the good 8 days a week, and twice on Sunday, because even in this game, in a game where people are walking out saying how bad he played, he rushed for 84 yards on 6 carries. He was 330 yards in this game. Like, Josh Allen made some pretty incredible throws. Josh Allen ran some dudes over to get big first downs in this game. He, like you said, the Vikings score on that fumble in the end zone. How much time was left? There was like a minute left, or however long, maybe even less than a minute left at that point. And Josh Allen goes right down the field, no problem, and gets a field goal.
69 yards in 39 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. No problems at all. Just ho-hum went right down the field and got that field goal to go to overtime. No one's talking about that at all. Absolutely no one's talking about that at all. They're just talking about the interceptions. And I understand why. I can't believe I'm running here to defend Josh Allen and cape for Josh Allen, but it's ridiculous how people kind of just overreact to one result. And I saw some egregious takes on the timeline about how Josh Allen is going to cost the Bills the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, sorry, I took too long of a pause there, but how do you cost a team a Super Bowl when they'd have absolutely no chance at a Super Bowl without you? It's just dumb.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen's a risk taker. He always has been. He's gonna fit the ball into a whole lot of tight windows, and he's gonna throw a few interceptions here or there. But Josh Allen's a phenomenal player, easily, in my opinion, as well as yours, the second best quarterback in the NFL. Playing injured in this game, might I add. The Bills are going to be fine. The most important thing is that they continue to keep Josh Allen healthy till the end of the season. But they're going to make noise in the playoffs. I'm not concerned about the Bills at all.
It actually felt like they probably should have let Josh Allen sit a game or two just to get. I mean, he looked good in this game, but they probably should have let him sit a game or two just to get right, because you probably feel good about your chances to make the playoffs no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on. Detroit at Chicago. Detroit wins 31-30 despite trailing 24-10 in the fourth quarter. Detroit made mistakes and Chicago just couldn't cash in. Goff throws a pick that was negated by a penalty, and then the Lions scored. On the Bears' next drive, Jeff Okudah intercepted a Justin Fields pass and he returned it for a touchdown. That was the first pick six for the Lions in 60 games, by the way, so it's been a while. But Jeff Okudah, a guy, by the way, at the start of the year, I said I thought he was poised to come back and show why he was drafted as highly as he was. He's having a good season. But Justin Fields, though, I want to talk about my guy Justin Fields. Obviously, he's got the pick six. That sucks. But he rushed for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns on 13 carries. He threw 2 touchdowns to Cole Kmet. Fields in this game became the only QB in NFL history with multiple 60-yard rushing touchdowns in the same season. That 67-yard rushing touchdown was just electric. He topped 20 miles per hour on that run. It was the 7th time this season he's topped 20 miles per hour. All other quarterbacks in the NFL have 9 times combined. Like, he is the best athlete at the quarterback position in the NFL. And this is why I was so high on him in the draft, because if you can figure out the passing part, which obviously is a big part of quarterbacking, if you can figure out the passing part, he is the most dynamic athlete at quarterback in the NFL. And the athleticism buys you time to figure out the passing, and you're seeing that the Bears are competitive with as bad as their offensive roster is. as bad as their defense is, because they're punting this season now, trading guys, they're competitive because of Justin Fields, and you love to see it. I'm excited to see what the Bears are going to do, how they're going to build around him this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, he's a highlight reel, and he is the most must-watch player in the NFL right now on a week-to-week basis, especially because he's not going to make the playoffs, so you kind of have to enjoy him while you can this regular season. While guys like Tua and Jalen and Mahomes and Allen, you're going to get chances to watch them in the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, 147 yards rushing, 11.3 yards per carry. I actually, the most impressed I was, though, with Justin Fields was through the air in this game. I felt like he took a lot of shots deep. He took one deep shot to Cole Kmet. He was wide open on another. But it was really good to see Justin Fields kind of have the courage to make some of the throws that he did down the field, where in the past it has felt a little dink and dunk at times when he's not running around. Yards per attempt here, well over eight at around 8.5. This was probably the best game he's played this year. I don't know if you disagree with that. The numbers might have been better against Miami, and the numbers might have been better even against Dallas. But just in terms of watching the 3 games, I thought this was his best game, even with a bad pick six. That was a mistake on his part and a bad throw. He also he promised after the game to never do that again. So I guess that means never throw a pick six again. So I'm gonna hold him to that. I'm gonna hold him to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we want to get better every game, so let's never throw a pick six again. I like it.
In 3 years, when he throws a pick six, I'm gonna be like on this podcast. I'm gonna be like, well, Justin, you said on November 13th of 2022 that you would never do that again.
Yeah, pull that clip up and save it. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
All right, let's roll on. Jacksonville at Kansas City. They lose 17-27. Doug Peterson opening the game. Did you see this? Did you watch? Yeah. Did you get? He opens the game with an onside kick that they recovered. It set the tone for what Jacksonville wanted to do. You're not going to be able to keep pace with Kansas City, so you play like this. I did think Doug should have stayed more aggressive, though. Like, he punted on 4th and a foot from their own 30 in the second quarter. And yeah, it's your own 30, but what are we doing here? I mean, you can't – converting on 4th and a foot is much more likely than recovering an onside kick. So I thought he shied away from that aggressiveness, but it was the aggressiveness that I love from Doug. On the Chiefs side, Kadarius Toney is going to be a weapon for the Chiefs, and the league made a mistake by letting Toney end up there. He has 33 rushing yards, 57 receiving yards. He scored a touchdown. He returns punts. I do not blame the Giants for getting him out of the building. You kind of wish somebody other than the Chiefs is where he would have ended up. But the Chiefs in this game, they lose the turnover battle 3-0, and they still controlled this game from start to finish. And in this game, Patrick Mahomes passed Dan Marino for the most touchdown passes in his first 75 starts, and he did it with 3 starts to spare. So he may put that record totally out of reach for the foreseeable future over the next 3 games.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the stat or something is that Patrick Mahomes throws for 300-plus yards and 4-plus touchdowns in like 15% of his games of his career. Which is just like an insane stat. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this game outside of the quarterback play. So before I get to that, I'll just say Andre Sisco not getting penalized for the hit he put on Juju, that concussed Juju, and is probably going to keep him out for a while, is just like, what are we doing, NFL? Like, how is that not reviewable? Like, we're all watching the same replays. You have to have some sort of capability from the booth to, when you see a reprehensibly bad hit that leads to, the fencing reaction where the Juju's putting his hands up by his face and he's terribly, terribly concussed on the field. Someone has to call in and be like, hey, Andre Sisco just launched himself like a missile at Juju's head with his helmet down. Maybe we throw a flag retroactively here. Obviously, that's not the, it's just funny when they pretend to care about player safety, because it's just so clear that they don't care about player safety at this point. But moving on from that morbid topic, I thought both quarterbacks played great. I thought Mahomes, I don't have to talk, I don't have to go too in depth to say, yeah, Patrick Mahomes, pretty good at football. He's the best quarterback I've ever seen. And even with everything I said about Josh Allen earlier and how good I think Josh Allen is, it's also games like what Josh Allen just had and games like what Patrick Mahomes just had kind of show you how dumb it was in the offseason when I was hearing people say Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the NFL, or they're neck and neck, or they're dead even, or they're tied for number one, 1A, 1B. No, it's Patrick Mahomes, and then there's a gap to Josh Allen. And that's not a slight on Josh Allen. It's props to, in my opinion, the most talented player to ever play the sport. The things Patrick Mahomes is doing, no one's ever done, especially this early in his career. And we were talking about it off air for years. Peak LeBron James was people would make jokes when the Charlotte Bobcats were still a team. To the kids out there, the Charlotte Bobcats were an NBA franchise. They're now the Charlotte Hornets. When the Charlotte Bobcats were an NBA franchise, people would joke and say, you put LeBron on the Bobcats and they'll win 50 games. Well, I think you put Patrick Mahomes on the Lions and I think they win 15 games. Like, I think they'd probably compete for a Super Bowl. I think you'd put them on any team in the NFL. I think they're automatically an 11-plus win team. They're automatically a top 4 to 5 contender in their conference. Mahomes is that special. But then on the other side, people aren't
The,
going to
the
talk.
ultimate the ultimate test of that would be put Patrick Mahomes on the Houston Texans. Could he get
Yeah,
them to the playoffs?
he could.
I think he could.
Uh,
I think he could. I
oh,
mean, it's
absolutely.
not the toughest division. Tennessee's pretty good, but and Houston has nothing. I mean, they got Brandon Cooks, but yeah,
No, yeah, I don't think there's a team you can name that I won't tell you that he can absolutely lead to the play. He can do it to Jacksonville as well. But Trevor Lawrence, on the people are going to talk about it because they scored 17 points. Trevor Lawrence played a great game in this game. I thought he was incredibly efficient, especially in the second half when they were trying to mount a little bit of a comeback. But 29 for 40, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns. I felt like he had a really, really good connection with Christian Kirk in this game. 9 catches for 105 yards on 12 targets, 2 touchdowns there. But he was going to Kirk a ton in this game. And I think that that's something to build on. You obviously are going to have Christian Kirk over the next couple of years with the contract they gave him, which doesn't look as bad with some of the numbers he's putting up. And then you have Calvin Ridley coming in next year. So you have to have some hope that this chemistry he's building with Kirk, once you throw Ridley into the mix and ETN has a full year under his belt and is kind of the do-it-all running back at that point, I think there's a lot to be excited about with the Jags offense for next year. Just like I think there's a lot to be excited about with the Bears offense for next year. It's just going to be on Jacksonville to put pieces around them.
yeah. I feel very good about the direction that Jacksonville is headed moving forward. So, all right, let's roll on. Cleveland at Miami. Cleveland gets trounced, 39-17. Tua, not just good when he's throwing to Tyreek Hill. He connected with 8 different receivers in this game. He threw touchdowns to 3 different receivers. He ended 25 of 32 for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Dolphins got their run game going too. Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert combined for 184 yards on 25 carries. That's almost 7.5 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. They also added 46 receiving yards. Tua has now thrown 3 passing touchdowns in 3 straight games. Miami's undefeated in games that Tua starts and ends as their quarterback. I have no interest in talking about Cleveland, but Miami, they could make a push. I really think they could make a push for the 1 seed in the AFC. Obviously, it's a little bit of an uphill climb with the Chiefs, but they are as legit of a Super Bowl contender out of the AFC as there is. We asked the question a little while back, who's the 4th best team in the NFL? I'm not sure that Miami's not in the top 3.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that'd be a take. I think they are probably 4th right now. I have some concerns about the defense. They didn't show themselves in this game. Cleveland wasn't able to really take advantage of what I think is a really bad secondary in Miami. You're going to have to see them play against some better passing attacks to see if they've kind of fixed some things there. That's going to be kind of the key, I think, with Miami's playoff aspirations this year.
Maybe their
But
secondary struggles so much because they just get demoralized in practice all week.
yeah, that could be it.
Maybe
No
Tua
confidence.
needs to turn in some clunkers in practice or something just to give a little bit of a confidence boost. Just do like you do with your kids playing basketball in the backyard. You're bricking shots and all that. Maybe Tua just needs to just pull his punches a little bit in practice.
Yeah, send Skylar Thompson out there. The defense will feel great about themselves. Um, but this is literally like, go back and watch the tape. Find me bad Tua plays. I think he played a perfect game here. And that's like, I hate to be the Tua non guy that just comes on here and capes for him every single week. 25 for 32, 285, 9 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 93.7 QBR here. Like, it was a near perfect game from Tua. It felt like every time they needed a third down conversion, every time it felt like they needed a big play, they were able to go and get that. He was also able to do it without Tyreek dominating the target share and dominating the receptions and yard share. 5 catches, 44 yards, a touchdown. It's funny. Each of those catches for Tyreek felt really important. Like, each of them were third down conversions or kind of a big play when the offense went in a little bit of a rut or early on in the game. But yeah, I mean, Tyreek and Waddle on the same offense is going to open up things obviously so much for the other people, and it opens up things so much for the running game because you're always kind of going to sacrifice the running game to do everything you can to stop Waddle and Hill as much as you can. And Jeff Wilson, it's just genius stuff from Miami and McDaniel. You trade for Jeff Wilson from San Fran, and I think a lot of people would be like, oh, I won't throw him right into the fire. McDaniel's like, I'm running the same plays I ran in San Fran, so I'll throw Wilson right in there. He knows the plays. And Wilson fits right into their scheme. It's a perfect match. Mostert ran well in this game. I'm always going to be skeptical of his health and if he's able to stay healthy. And that's why you give him limited carries. You give him 8 carries and he gets his 65 yards. That's probably how you should use Mostert. Jeff Wilson, in my opinion, can be a legitimate kind of bell cow back for them. And that helps their offense so much. I mean, this is absolutely one of the 3 best offenses in football.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's roll on. Houston at New York Giants. They lose 16-24 in a game that I don't have much to talk about. Saquon Barkley gets a career high carries, 35 for 152 yards. Daniel Jones was an efficient 13-17 for 197 yards, 2 touchdowns with a 153.3 QB rating. Houston's offense just looked lost. They opened the game with 3 straight 3-and-outs. They had 86 first half yards, and 44 of those came on one run by Dameon Pierce. So Texans stink. They're going to be in contention for the number 1 overall pick. The Giants continue to win games, and I'm still not sold on the Giants. They're a well-coached team. I still just feel like I'm waiting on the other shoe to drop, but the other shoe is going to have to drop like ASAP, or the Giants are going to be in the playoffs. Like, they're going to be in the playoffs. I just wonder how they're going to do against some better opponents.
Unders are 16-1 in the last 17 Giants home games. That's an insane stat. I heard it 2 weeks ago when it was 14-1. Bet it the last 2 home games. It has hit the last 2 home games. So they play again this week at home against the Detroit Lions. The under is at 46.5. I'll be on the Giants home unders again at MetLife. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about this game. Daniel Jones played very well.
All right. New Orleans at Pittsburgh. New Orleans loses 20-10. TJ Watt returned in this game, the first time he's played since week 1 when he had the injury. It was the pectoral injury. He didn't get a sack. He didn't make an impact on how the defense played. He ended the day with 4 tackles. New Orleans converted only 3 of 12 third downs in this game. They had no rushing attack. They only had 29 rushing yards. Their decision to look at this roster and to take an additional first-round pick, it was the worst decision in an offseason littered with awful decisions. It was the worst. Like, literally all they had to do was say, our Hall of Fame quarterback is gone. Our Hall of Fame coach is retiring. We're in cap hell. All they had to do was sit on their hands for 3 months and do nothing. They would have tanked this season, which they're doing anyways, and they would have sat there with a top 5 pick in next year's draft. They would have selected their quarterback of the future. They would have had tons of cap room, and they could have lured in a head coach. Instead, they've set their franchise back by years with their awful decisions this offseason. Like sometimes, you know, we'll just quote Kenny Rogers. Sometimes you got to know when to hold them, and sometimes you got to know when to fold them. And the Saints should have folded this offseason, but they chose to push their chips into the middle of the table, and they're going to pay dearly for it over the next couple of years. On the Steelers side, Najee Harris had 20 carries for 99 yards, and the rookie Jalen Warren had 77 yards on 12 touches out of the backfield. That's combined passes and rushes. But it's nice to see the Steelers get some semblance of a ground game going. And then kind of the crazy stat is Mike Tomlin has now beaten every team in the NFL except the Steelers. So at some point in time, he's got to go coach for a different team for a year so he can beat the Steelers and become the first coach to ever beat all 32 teams.
Yeah, this Saints season was just, I mean, it's almost like two people on this podcast told you exactly how this season was going to play out for you, Saints fans. Like, we told you were not going to be good. There were Saints fans out there expecting to go to the playoffs. There were Saints fans out there expecting to win the division. There were people on ESPN, Bart Scott, saying that the Saints had the best roster in the NFL. And I just never understood where the optimism was coming from. And every week that you watch them, they look worse and worse. Dennis Allen looks like that Raiders head coaching job that we all wrote off as being, oh, well, it was the Raiders. How can you really blame him? Looks like maybe you could blame him. Looks like he probably is a bad football coach. And I think we're seeing that at length now. And on top of that, they go and trade Chauncey Gardner-Johnson right before the season
for nothing
to the team that you gave your first round pick to. Like, you're just Howie Roseman just goes to bed at night like thinking about what he's going to do next to the New Orleans Saints. Like, he has just stolen that franchise's soul over the last 9 months or so. So yeah, it's crazy to see how down south this Saints season is going. I will say the Saints probably get a win this week, playing the Cooper Cup-less Rams upcoming. They do have a tough stretch after that of pretty tough games, including us on the schedule. So I don't think the Saints are getting more than 5 or 6 wins. So I think you can safely say we're getting a top 6 to 7 pick. I've already done Shane, I'm already diving into Will Anderson versus Miles Murphy. Will Anderson, the Bama edge rusher for people who don't know, and the Miles Murphy, the Clemson defensive end for people who don't know. I've been diving deep on comparing the two. I thought I was a Will Anderson guy, starting to become a Miles Murphy guy. But then
I'm so upset when they take Jalen Carter.
I know. I like Jalen Carter. I do like Jalen Carter a lot. He's a freak. He's a beast. I just would prefer an edge. I would prefer one of those two guys. And I think those two guys are both so good that they're at least on Carter's level, and edge makes more sense for what we need. But I won't. If Cox is gone, if Hargrave's gone, if Tuipulotu's gone, if they have Davis and him, and that's pretty much what they're paying to defensive tackles, then that's fine. I'd be fine with that. But the Steelers, this is kind of what we thought the Steelers would be. When I thought the Steelers would be a 9-win team, maybe even a 10-win team that kind of gets by on defense and running the ball, and Pickett does just enough. These were kind of the games I envisioned, 20-10. And I did see a stat. The Steelers are 1-9 without TJ Watt over the last 3 years, and they're like 17-8-1 or something with him, something crazy like that. Is it just that simple that, maybe the Steelers would be like 4-5 or 5-4 if TJ Watt hadn't missed the season?
Maybe. I mean, their defense is totally different with TJ Watt. So, I remember even talking on this podcast when they won that one game earlier this year. I said it was the first game they've ever won without TJ Watt since he was drafted. And I think, if they could have had a ground game earlier, if they would have gone to Kenny Pickett earlier and let him take his lumps in those first few games they were losing anyways. But I still don't think they're going to get to 500. They're what, 3-6 now. But I would love that just for the continued storyline of Mike Tomlin never having a losing season for the Steelers.
Yeah, I do think the Steelers have the potential here to go on a bit of a run. I know this isn't the preview show for Week 11, but they are +5 against the Bengals this week. I do like them +5.
Who they beat Week 1.
Yeah, there's some matchup stuff there that they've done pretty well against the Burrow Bengals. So I do think that the Steelers compete in this game and potentially even win the game. And if you win the game at that point, you beat the Bengals, who you'd send the Bengals to I think 5-6, and you'd move to 4 and I think they'd be 4-5 at that point. At that point, it's not crazy to say that the Steelers can get back in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see what happens there. I'm going to be pulling for the Steelers. I would love for them to just go on a little bit of a run here, but let's roll on to the Denver Broncos at Tennessee. Denver loses this game 17-10, despite starting up 10-0 in this game. Russell Westbrook. Wow.
This game's going to be off in general. Our coverage of this game is going to be off in general. I did not watch a snap of this game, and I don't plan on it. You can't make me, Shane.
Well, Russell Wilson took 6 sacks and was hit 18 times by the Titans pass rush. And this is every team Russell Wilson plays for has an offensive line, a bad offensive line. Russell Wilson's the common denominator, right? If you're dating somebody and every time they talk about an ex, it's the crazy ex. All the exes probably weren't crazy, right? This is how it feels with Russell Wilson and the offensive lines at this point. Warren Sharp put out this stat on Twitter. He said that when Russell Wilson threw the ball within 2.6 seconds, which is the NFL average, he had 3 hits and 0 sacks. When he held it beyond 2.6 seconds, he took 14 hits and was sacked 6 times. So this is on Russell Wilson, just like it's always been on Russell Wilson. On a day that their elite defense, which is being totally wasted by a garbage quarterback and head coach, they held Derrick Henry to 53 yards rushing. But the Titans had a wide receiver whose name I've never heard before, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Top 100 yards for the first time this season for a Titans receiver as they climbed out of a 10-0 hole and they won. So the Titans continue to win. The Broncos continue to do Broncos things.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. The Broncos were up 10-0. This was not a game I had on one of my TVs or had any bets on. And I made a comment to my friend where I said, Titans are probably going to win this game and no one will care. That's exactly what happened.
Yep. All right. Well, another game that nobody cares about. Okay, that's mean. Somebody out there cares about it. The Indianapolis Colts at the Las Vegas Raiders. Indianapolis won this game 25-20. Indianapolis has a coach who has never coached and a play caller in Parks Frazier who has never called plays, and they beat the Raiders. Just in case you were wondering how the Raiders season's going, who also went all in, spending multiple picks for Devontae Adams. Now they're not going to have. Now they're going to give up a top 5 pick that they could have used to go get a quarterback. Since starting 6-0 in Denver in 2009 as a head coach, Josh McDaniels is 7-24 as a head coach. And yet, to hear Raiders ownership talk about him, he's just doing a great job. It was going to take a while. No, it wasn't. You didn't think it was going to take a while, or you wouldn't have traded a first and a second round pick for a receiver on the wrong side of 30. Like, it's been a complete and utter disaster in Las Vegas. And Josh McDaniels should lose his job, but they can't fire him because they're still paying John Gruden. And they can't pay 2 coaches that don't coach for them anymore. So the Raiders are stuck. Derek Carr is going to be the scapegoat, and he hasn't been great this year. But Carr will be gone. He is most definitely going to be the new quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts next season. As Ballard does not ever learn his lesson. And he's gonna move on from Matt Ryan to go get the quarterback that just got beat by Matt Ryan. That's my prediction.
The comments on McDaniels were crazy, or McDaniels were crazy. They were saying it basically sounded like he had just hired him. Like it feels like he was just hadn't paid attention to the first 10 games by some of his comments. Definitely bizarre behavior from Mark Davis, and it's going to take a while. You made the playoffs last year with Rich Bisaccia, with your special teams coordinator. coming in the middle of the season. One quick question: do they have to pay Gruden? I thought that would didn't they sue him? Weren't they like in a lawsuit against him? I feel like that has to be for cause. The way that they
Uh,
fired Gruden, I feel like it has to be for cause.
I don't know.
That's an
I'm gonna Google
interesting.
it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Maybe that could be ongoing, honestly, that litigation. But yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing. I don't know if they still have to pay Gruden. They are like,
He was still owed $40 million.
yeah,
Okay, the Raiders reached an undisclosed contract settlement with John Gruden.
yeah, there you go.
So they did something, but they paid him something.
They're very cash poor, the Raiders. Mark Davis. That was why they traded Khalil Mack, because they didn't have the money to pay Khalil Mack at all at that time. So their owner basically forced them to trade him.
Yeah. And then on the Colts side, you got Matt Ryan plays quarterback after a weird scenario, right? So ownership forces uh, the coaching staff to bench Matt Ryan and go to Sam Ellinger, and then fires the coach and the offensive coordinator when it doesn't work. Jeff Saturday says Sam Ellinger's the guy, but then he played Matt Ryan. I wonder how somebody should ask Frank Reich how he feels about Jeff Saturday getting to play the quarterback he wanted to when Reich wasn't afforded that opportunity. But that's neither here nor there. The Colts are a mess. But Matt Ryan goes 17 for his first 21 passing. He only took one sack. He had no fumbles. He even had a 39-yard run, Mark. Did he spend these 2 weeks off? Matty Ice, icing up, sipping from the fountain of youth. Is he ready to make a run into 2023 now?
That 39-yard run is like a longer run than half of the teams in the NFL have this season, including the Eagles, by the way.
Yeah, he outrushed Jalen Hurts on Sunday.
That's a good question actually, but he he definitely. I think the Eagles' longest run this year is like 25 yards or something like that. I heard that on a podcast. So that Matt Ryan run was longer than any run that the Eagles have had this season, which is very funny.
He's a very explosive athlete. I've always said that about Matt Ryan.
You had a big tweet go viral last year when the Falcons played the Eagles and he juked out. I'm forgetting their name right now.
It was the Vikings linebacker, not Anthony Harris. That was the safety. Who was the? I can't remember the linebacker's name, but
I can't believe I can't remember that. Wow.
It was week 1 and everybody was hyped about that guy, and I'd been saying it was no good, and then Matt Ryan like juked him, and I remember tweeting out Eric Wilson.
Eric Wilson,
the Eagles' best linebacker, getting juked out of his shorts by a 38-year-old Matt Ryan, and the Falcons retweeted it. Like the Falcons SB Nation account retweeted it, and it kind of blew up.
Yeah. I mean, he's an explosive athlete, Matt Ryan. He always has been. Back to his Boston College days. On the other side here, Derek Carr, I think it's unfair to say that he's going to be the Colts quarterback next year, because he's going to be the Washington Commanders quarterback next year. That's his true destiny, to go be the Commanders quarterback. Him and Ron Rivera would get along. Derek Carr crying on the, I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't think you did. Derek Carr crying on the podium after the game. You feel bad for him. He's kind of one of those guys. Seems like he's probably a good guy, a little corny, but it definitely feels like, man, he's gonna get all the blame here when I don't know if it's his fault. Even though I will say he's played bad. He has not looked like himself. He has regressed. But man, this situation is clearly so much bigger than him.
Well, if he does go to Washington to be their quarterback, then I guess that means Carson Wentz is available. Maybe the Colts would be interested there.
They don't have any history with him at all. And by the way, when Derek Carr goes to Washington, I'm totally going to talk myself in on it, and I'm totally going to say how it's going to make them a wild card team. Well, I guess, maybe they might be back in the running for the wild card now, but I talk myself in on the Commanders every offseason for some reason.
All right, let's talk about another NFC East team. That's the Dallas Cowboys, who lost to Green Bay 28-31. Down 14. Oh, well, by the way, okay, I'll talk about this in a minute. But down 14 in the fourth quarter, Rodgers connected with Christian Watson 2 times for touchdowns to get it into overtime. And then in overtime, the Cowboys get the ball first. They drove down the field. They elected to go for it on a 4th and 3 over attempting a 52-yard field goal. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I would, if I was the coach, I'd have an analytical model to go for that. I'm not sure how I feel about that actual decision, but it did not pay off as they didn't pick up the first down. And then obviously the Packers drove down and got a field goal. CeeDee Lamb had a big day with 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dak Prescott threw 2 interceptions to Rudy Ford in this game, so not an ideal day for Dak Prescott. But my great moment from this game is watching this game, and after Christian Watson just did not track the deep ball from Aaron Rodgers at all, I tweeted this out. I said, he may well develop with time, but at this point of his career, Christian Watson is just a bad football player. An hour later, he had caught 3 touchdown passes. Only the second rookie with 3 receiving touchdowns against Dallas. The other is Randy Moss, by the way. And so I quote tweeted that, and I said, as I've always said, Christian Watson is a fantastic football player. And one of my followers gave me a perfect out there and said that I did say he would develop with time, and he apparently developed over that hour. So that's my out. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I called Christian Watson developing and going off to take down the Cowboys.
Man, this was a rough Dak game. This was one of those games where you just say, like, maybe he is overrated. Dak has quickly become, I think, the toughest evaluation in the league at quarterback. It's really hard to try to figure out where Dak belongs on the tiers, and you put him in the tier below. Like, if you put him in the tier below where he belongs, he's next to guys, and you're like, are you serious? Like, he's so much better than these guys. And then you put him on the tier above that, and he's next to guys where he's like, man, I feel way better about these guys in the situation than Dak. Like, he can't be on the same tier as, like, Joe Burrow or even Tua right now with the way Tua is playing. 2 picks, and they both come at in the last 15 minutes of the game. Man, Dallas probably deserved to win this game. They should have won this game. They were up 28-14 with 13 minutes to go in this game. CeeDee Lamb was unbelievable. Tony Pollard was unbelievable. Their defense played well for the first 47 minutes of the game. And then Aaron Rodgers turned it on, and Aaron Rodgers looked like Aaron Rodgers, and the Dallas Cowboys defense looked like kind of what we thought they'd look like coming into the year, and not looked like the dominant unit we've seen all year. I don't know if that's just them being tired, but it's almost like the fourth quarter was a completely different, portion of this game. Like, it was like completely disconnected from the rest of the game.
And
Dallas
suddenly they've given up 29 and 31 points in their last 2 games.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And people weren't. I don't think it got talked about with Chicago because they were in control of that game for so long that it kind of went under the radar that the defense maybe didn't play up to their standards. But now after 2 straight weeks, you can definitely kind of point to that.
Yeah. So interesting to track there for Dallas. Fortunately for them, the Eagles also dropped their game, so they didn't lose ground in the division. I guess they did technically to the Giants, but not to the division lead. So it's one they'd like to have back. You wonder if Green Bay is going to turn this thing around. It's too little too late for the division, but you wonder if Christian Watson can get going, if Aaron Rodgers starts to trust him, if they could make a push for a wild card spot. So I feel like we're still at a place in the NFC where I know the Eagles are good. I don't know, is anybody else in the NFC good? Like, I just don't know how to stack these teams in the NFC up.
I will just say the Packers have a really tough schedule coming up here. Titans at home, Eagles on the road, Bears on the road, Rams at home, that's not bad. Dolphins on the road, Vikings on the road, Lions at home. Like, having the Titans, the Eagles, the Dolphins, and the Vikings still remaining on the schedule is pretty brutal.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see what unfolds there. Let's go to another game. Arizona. Oh, you got something else there?
We're going to another game that I watched 0.00% of.
Yeah, Arizona at Los Angeles Rams. Arizona wins 27-17. I can't believe you didn't watch this game. It had the matchup that I was waiting for all week as Colt McCoy was under center against John Wolford. So that's what I mean when we circled this game on the calendar before the year started. That's what we wanted to see. Obviously, hamstring injury for Kyler, concussion protocol for Matt Stafford. Colt McCoy obviously outplays Wolford. He goes actually pretty good game for Colt McCoy. 8 of 11 for 123 yards and 1 touchdown on passes of 10 plus air yards. Biggest thing in this game is Cooper Kupp left in the fourth quarter with an injury to his ankle. Came out later that he is having surgery. He's going on IR. So the Rams are done. They're 2 games out of the wild card right now. They lost the only playmaker they have on offense. Rams are done. They will not make the playoffs, and I don't know. I don't know what you do from here. It's a house of cards. You feel like Sean McVay almost retired last offseason. Aaron Donald almost retired last offseason. Matthew Stafford has the elbow things going on. Like, it could get ugly for the Rams really quick, which just makes me think of how stupid the Carolina Panthers were to turn down 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick from the Rams for Brian Burns. Like, those would have been such good picks because the Rams are headed for a total collapse. It might not happen. Like, they might be fine in 2023. They will be in total disarray by 2024 and 2025 when those picks were to come due. That was a huge missed opportunity for the Panthers to take that deal.
Yeah, I get both sides there. I do think Brian Burns is a stud. But the upside there from the Rams, yeah, it's probably too high to pass up.
All right, well, let's move on to the last game, the Sunday night football game. It was the Chargers at the 49ers. The 49ers win 22-16. The 49ers defense is as good as advertised. Up a score with 2 minutes left, they get a turnover on downs. Then on a last chance, because their offense goes 3 and out, they hit Herbert's arm and they get a pick. The 49ers offense is bad. It's very bad. Their defense is unbelievably talented. And you have to think with the weapons they have on offense, with Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, like, eventually they're going to scrape together just if they have the 21st best offense, this is a potential Super Bowl caliber team with this defense.
Yeah, the offense is not playing well. I'm not going to go as far to call it bad because last week it looked fantastic. The week before that, even, it looked pretty good, and I think a couple weeks before that it looked good. Like, it's just week to week, you don't know what Jimmy G you're going to get, and that's really what it comes down to. In this game, you got boring, below average Jimmy G. And when you get that, you're going to score about 20 to 23 points, and it's going to come down to how your defense plays. And you're right, this defense is a top 5 defense, and this defense is probably going to win most of those games as long as Jimmy G doesn't totally implode. But it almost feels like Kyle Shanahan right now is that kid on December 26th at the day after Christmas, and he got so many toys, and he's just like, I want to play with Christian McCaffrey, and it's like, wait, I have Deebo Samuel, like, let me go do that. Like, it almost feels like he's a little bit like all over the place with the way he was calling plays in this game, where it's like he would lock in on Deebo for a drive, and then he'd lock in on McCaffrey for a drive, and then he'd lock in on Ayuk for a drive, and then he'd be like, oh, let's make this an Elijah Mitchell drive. Like, it almost felt like he couldn't work into a flow of including all of them and incorporating all of them at the same times, and kind of going back and forth. I don't know how to explain that any better, but it was very weird, kind of like how he was peppering certain guys at certain times.
Yeah. On the Chargers side, the Chargers chose to waive Jerry Tillery, who was a defensive tackle. He was a former first-round pick. He'd played 35% of the snaps for them this season, and they waived him. And they waived him a week after they lost Austin Johnson for the season. And then in this game, they lost 2 more defensive linemen, and they were so thin on the defensive line. Elijah Mitchell returned for the first time since week 1. He had a team-high 18 carries for 89 yards for San Francisco. The Chargers just, I don't get it. I don't get the Chargers. I think they need to clean house this offseason. But just some of their personnel decisions, it just doesn't make sense to me. This is just such a. I know they've been banged up by injuries, but it's such an underachieving team. That aside, they don't inspire any confidence whatsoever.
Also, this is a game that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen didn't play, and you're winning. They were winning for a lot of the game. The Chargers. How does Austin Eckler get 6 carries? What are we doing? What are we doing? Austin, he got 7 catches, so I get it. He got 13 touches, 7 catches for 39 yards. So they were clearly just using those as rushes, I guess. 6 carries, like that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So the Chargers hopes. I mean, the Chargers could still make the playoffs. They're
They
still right
probably
there.
will.
What are they? 6-4 now, I think. I forgot to jot that down. 6-5. Wait, they can't be 6. Okay. Okay, I was gonna say they can't be 6-5. It's just week 10. 5-4. So they could still make the playoffs, but I have no confidence in Joe Lombardi. I'm losing all confidence in Brandon Staley. And I think how funny would it be if Shane Steichen is back in Los Angeles next year as the head coach for the Chargers?
It's not unlikely.
Yeah, that's so. Anyways, we'll see what happens there. That's about going to wrap it up for all of our games. I'm going to lead off with my. Oh, you got something else?
Just because it popped in my brain and I heard about this last week, there is some Sean Payton to LA buzz there.
Yeah, I could see that. Payton has seemed to indicate that he does not want to go for a rebuilding team. Like he wants to just step into a good situation, and the Chargers would fit that. They've got a superstar quarterback. The Saints obviously have to be willing to work with you there. I think Peyton either ends up with the Chargers or he ends up with the Cowboys. I could see the Cowboys getting in the playoffs, losing in the divisional round again, and Jerry Jones firing Mike McCarthy and going to get Sean Payton. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think so. I'm going to lead off here. My final thoughts. Shane Steichen's going to get a job this offseason. He's going to go somewhere. I like the idea of him going to the Chargers because that's where he came from to begin with. But we'll see on that. But if he goes and my coaching carousel, it spins around and Frank Reich becomes the Eagles' offensive coordinator again. And I would love that fit. I think he's good at what he does, like working with game planning and working with quarterbacks. And obviously he's got some familiarity with Nick Sirianni. They work together. Although it'd be the weird little power struggle flip, right? You go from offensive coordinator under Frank Reich to head coach over Frank Reich. But I wouldn't be surprised if Frank Reich ends up in the Eagles building before the end of the season as a consultant, and that he sort of gets that on-ramp to OC, assuming Shane Steichen goes somewhere else. So that was just something I was thinking about during the Eagles game on Monday night before it started to go south. But I know you're always big into the coaching carousel. I'm already thinking that direction with some of the jobs that are going to be open. Just interested to see how all that plays out.
Yeah, and Sirianni basically kind of hinted at that when they asked him about Frank Reich potentially joining the staff. Reich said that he doesn't believe that that's his last head coaching job. I don't know if that means he'd be willing to take an OC job to get back to that. But the way it read, it seems like he thinks he'll be, thrown right into the coaching carousel for head coach hire. So that might preclude maybe he goes and does that, and if he doesn't get it, then he comes here. I could see that being the case. I don't think Frank Reich is just going to get another head coaching job without being an OC again. That's just my read on the situation. But that'll be an interesting thing to track. And I think if he does take an OC job, it'll probably be here. If I had to guess that.
And the Eagles would have the patience to wait because if you're planning on him being your OC and you say, see if you get a head coaching job you like, if not, come be our OC. They could sit on that if Steichen got poached because they have Brian Johnson that they could always promote to OC, and I don't think anybody would have problems with that unless somebody tries to poach him to be their OC, which could certainly happen. He's done a great job this year as QB coach for the Eagles, so. All of the 3D chess that goes on with coaching carousel. We'll definitely cover that because we both love that stuff. But it's not quite time for it yet. It was just on my mind the other night.
Yeah, we'll
Oh, you got muted there.
next week. Let's do a little bit of a coaching carousel exercise where we say if a guy is going to get fired or not. That could be a fun little thing with a couple weeks ago. My final thoughts will be on that. Then I hadn't prepared final thoughts, but looks like we could get a couple one and dones. Obviously, it doesn't look like that'll happen with McDaniels, but I think maybe they lose out, or maybe if it gets really, really bad, then they're going to have to make a decision. Doesn't seem like they will with the Mark Davis quotes, but feels like it has to be at least brought up for conversation. And then you have Dennis Allen, and man, I don't know if they'd fire him. He's been there a while now. They clearly respect him, but oof, that'd be a hard sell to a fan base to get excited for next year. When you don't have a first round pick to replenish your team, you're probably not going to fix the quarterback situation. And you just say, hey guys, we're running it back with Dennis Allen. Like, man, it was a very up and down coaching cycle, it seems. Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll feel like they were perfect hires and literally could not be better options for Miami and New York. And then you have McDaniels and you have Dennis Allen. It looks like the opposite right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I think Denver is definitely
Hackett.
Hackett.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Hackett's gone. I don't even know if he makes the rest of the season, but he's in that unique position where not only is he awful, but he was hired to poach Aaron Rodgers, which didn't happen. And then they mortgaged everything for Russell Wilson, and they're tied to Russell Wilson. They can't get rid of him. But they can scapegoat Hackett, and the ownership that they have now is not even the one that hired him. So he's a dead man walking. It just remains to be seen if he makes it through the rest of the season.
I can't believe I just did a segment on first year coaches and how bad they've been and how good they've been and didn't mention Hackett. That's a bad job by me. But yeah, it's Hackett's a complete moron. Hackett is absolutely getting fired. There's no way he doesn't get fired. So yeah, I think at least one gets fired, and there's probably one of the other two does. Probably Allen, if I had to guess. So probably two coaches getting fired after 1 year, which is like that only happens like once every few years. Like Steve Wilkes was one I remember in Arizona. I remember Chudzinski in Cleveland was 1 years ago. There hasn't been all that many. It's not that common. Might be two right away. Could be three.
Lovie Smith?
Lovey did. Not Lovey. Coley did last year. David Coley did in Houston. Could be Lovey. I don't know if a team has ever fired a 1 year coach back-to-back years.
Because, I mean, the Texans looked better last year with Coley, and they fired him, which surprised both of us. Lovie Smith is, I mean, not that he walked into a good situation, but he's performed worse than Coley did last year. So, could be. We'll see.
Mills has regressed horribly. Davis Mills was someone I was excited to watch last year. Like, he at least made some fun throws down the field. That game he played against New York, he should have been benched. He was bad.
We seriously had discussions on podcasts last year of like, I mean, could they have found their franchise guy?
It felt like
there's no doubt now that they did not.
Nah, they had to ask Lovey. Actually, I saw this because in my one league, I desperately needed a quarterback this coming week because of a bye. And I was looking at Davis Mills, and they had to ask Lovey if they were going to bench him. After the game, they asked him if he thought to make a change going forward, and he said he'll be the quarterback the rest of the year. I don't even know who their backup is, but if you're having to ask questions on if you're going to bench him, then man, it must have been even worse than what I was seeing just from what I saw.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, well, I think we have meandered enough through Week 10 of the NFL. Thank you to everyone listening. If you're still with us, if you joined us for episode number 80 of Chalk Talk, if you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you guys do, be sure you smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. We really appreciate those. They really help us out. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm on YouTube at Shane Half NFL. Give Mark a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we will see you guys next week.